I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Boulder Valley Board of Education for Tuesday. Oh, sorry, Laura. Yeah, we're moving. December 12th. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Benford? Fuqua?
Here.
Garcia?
Here.
Gebhardt?
Here.
Marquis?
Here.
Myers?
Here.
Sargent?
Here.
Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to remind everybody that the mission of the Boulder Valley School District is to create a challenging, meaningful, and engaging learning opportunities so that all children thrive and are prepared for successful, civically engaged lives. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us here, and thank you to those of you who are watching at home. We're glad to have you observe and participate in our meetings. As always, we'll begin with the superintendent's report. Dr. Stevenson.
And I am not going to subject you to my voice for very long, so I will just tell you all that tomorrow the district cabinet will be engaging in our respectful workplace training. Then we'll make a determination of any other parts of the organization where we think that it would be beneficial for them to have the training. And I won't make you listen to me any longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Are there any questions? No. Okay. So for our next item, we will be having public hearing and public participation. The board recognizes the value of public comment on issues related to the operation of the schools. To ensure that our meeting is conducted in an orderly manner, we ask that the persons who address the board confine your comments to matters that are germane to the business of the school district. Speakers on agenda items will be heard first, followed by those speaking to non-agenda items. Limit your presentation to 2 minutes. If we go over the first hour, public comment will continue at the end of the meeting. I don't think that will be the case tonight. Recognize that students often attend or view our meetings. Speakers' remarks, therefore, should be suitable for an audience that includes kindergarten through 12th grade students. The board president may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement that is unrelated to the business of the district or inappropriate for K through 12 students. There is a lighting system on the podium, starting at green when your 2 minutes start, turning to yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining, and turning to red at the end. When the light turns red, please wrap up your comments so that the board can hear from the maximum number of speakers. So this evening, speaking to agenda items, we have first Michael Guidarelli. I'm sorry, Guidarelli, thank you.
Good evening, Madam President, Madam Superintendent, members of the school board, staff, and guests. I'm here representing school bus drivers to request that Boulder Valley School District School Board approve and supply cameras for all school buses in the fleet, not just sped buses. School bus drivers face a long list of challenges which are at best difficult and at worst impossible to deal with without assistance. Among the challenges include the following: whether the school bus is moving or not, students standing, switching seats, climbing out over seats, standing on their head on the seat. I have witnessed that. Throwing objects out the window, hitting cars, bicyclists, pedestrians, throwing food or objects in the bus. Hands, head, arms outside the windows. Damaging, vandalizing the bus, making a mess in the bus with food or other objects. Fighting, verbal abuse of bus driver or other students. Physical abuse of bus driver or other students. Running in the bus, performing gymnastics in the bus, smoking on the bus, playing loud music without earbuds, and numerous other innovative ways of getting attention from their peers and putting themselves, other passengers, and the bus driver in dangerous circumstances. A bus driver's primary responsibility is to get our students to and from school safely and in a safe environment. Installation of cameras would help offset what the bus driver said versus what the student said in an incident, because now you have proof. Bus drivers don't feel that they have the support or respect of Boulder Valley School District's administrators in a number of areas. The board's past refusal to install cameras in every school bus is but one of the areas where bus drivers feel marginalized. So I would appreciate your support in installing cameras in all school buses in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes speakers on agenda items. Moving to non-agenda items, we'll start with, I believe it's Jeff Cahoon.
Good evening, board members. My name is Jeff Cahoon. I live at 1420 Elder Avenue in Boulder, Colorado. And I am proud to be the vice chair of the Boulder County Democratic Party. Also in attendance is our chair, Ellen Burns. We bring before you an important issue where we interface with the school board and school facilities. And that is the state of Colorado relies on the caucus system as a primary means where candidates are placed on the primary ballot. It is within the state statutes that caucus is held every other year, even years, representing presidential election years and midterm elections on the first Tuesday in March. That is, caucus is a significant civic event mandated under state law and occurs on a predictable basis. Due to the size and distribution of Boulder County's population, school buildings are appropriate sites due to ADA requirements as well as geography. Nevertheless, we are finding it challenging to successfully reserve and contract for schools and rooms within the schools due to conflicting school events. We are asking you to consider moving down the road to enact basically a policy that would ask principals to keep the evening of the first Tuesday in March of even-numbered years open and available for use by political parties, not just us. As long as requests are submitted, we would suggest perhaps by December 1st of that year. If we, as a political party, do not make a reservation, then they can schedule a bake sale or an event or something along that line. But if these, we have just found that it is practically a bit of a problem doing this, and it's a very predictable thing. This occurs every other year, first Tuesday in March. If you were to take that action, we think it would greatly aid the process, simplify the process, and we would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Neil Anderson.
Good evening. Can I just ask protocol real quick? Do I give my address? No. Okay. Previous school district did. Good evening. My name is Neil Anderson, Superintendent Stevenson, Madam President, members of the board. I'm the proud new principal of Monarch High School, and I'd like to introduce myself to you. At your November meeting, you had a Monarch parent come and speak about the various concerns that he had regarding Monarch High School. I applaud him for coming in front of you because I think transparency is important. And in fact, the gentleman and I spoke via phone shortly after that meeting, and last Friday he and I met in person and had a lovely conversation, and we were able to cover many of topics that he wanted to talk about, and I had in turn had the ability to respond to. However, I think it's important for you to also know of all the great work that happens at Monarch High School on a daily basis. To that end, I'd like to start with our great staff. Every day, in each and every one of our classes, in every single period, I have incredibly talented teachers engaging our students in critical thinking, analytical writing, critical reading, and the skills necessary to become 21st century adults and also successful graduates of Boulder Valley School District and Monarch High School. We have great students that care about their passion, their interests, they're passionate about their studies, and they have dreams and aspirations of where they're going to go beyond Monarch High School. And we have an incredible supportive community that engages and supports our school in the variety of different activities that we offer our students, not only in the classroom and the athletic field, but through our fine arts programs and various activities that we have. The school focus that we have at Monarch High School is around engaging students in their cognitive load, specifically around academic discourse and oracy, while supporting them through social emotional learning and supports that we can provide our students on a daily basis in our classes, in our hallways, and through our events. We support a safe and positive learning environment, and this is championed not only in our school but also in our activities. To that end, we've adjusted in the fall how we engage our students and come into our school, and we are proactive in our communication. In conclusion, I'd invite you to come to Monarch anytime you would want. I'd be happy to show you around our hallways and our classrooms and celebrate with you in the good work that we're doing at Monarch High School. Thank you for your time tonight, and again, I welcome you to come to Monarch High School anytime that works in your schedule. Good evening.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Michelle Gazarek. Is that correct? Is there, is that right, Laura? Michelle Gazarek?
She is not present. She was a parent of mine that wanted to come and speak as well, but she is not present this evening.
Okay, great. So maybe we'll hear from her another time. All right. So that concludes public participation, and we appreciate hearing from you this evening. We'll move on to our next item, which is board communication. Who would like to begin? Kathy?
I'd like to start by congratulating Richard. It's my understanding that he received an award, a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Rocky Mountain Institute on Peace and Justice. And I meant to pull up the information around why he was honored, but I have to say I wasn't surprised, and I'm just honored to be serving with you, Richard. I am sure that award was well-deserved, and I just wanted to say congratulations because I think that was a great honor, so congratulations on that. And then as far as some of the public comment, I have asked for a estimate of what it would cost to put cameras on all the buses, and we will be looking at that. I mean, there's also the ongoing maintenance costs that we'll have to figure out, but I'm hoping we can bring that issue forward when we look at our revised budget again in January and we look at the issue of cameras. So thank you. I have to say your job is very challenging, and I wasn't surprised to hear the list of antics that students are doing on buses. Somewhat a little disappointed, I suppose, but not surprised. So I'm sure I couldn't do it in 2 minutes, I wouldn't think. So anyway, thank you for bringing that forward. I really appreciate it. And thank you to Mr. Anderson for the invitation. I would love to sometime after the holidays take you up on that invitation to come out and look at Monarch and tour. So just a couple things. I think, are we going to do at some point a recount of CASB and takeaways from CASB at another board meeting?
We don't have it on tonight's agenda, but maybe in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't talk about what we learned at CASB, but I also just want to say thanks to everybody for the great ribbon cutting at Meadowlark yesterday. I thought it was a really nice event. Richard represented the board and spoke on behalf of all of us, and Cindy, even with your raspy voice, I really appreciated your comments, and Rob and everybody who were there to give tours. It was a huge turnout. It was really nice to see all of the kids and the parents so excited, and it is really, truly a beautiful school. So thank you for all the hard work that went into opening that school, and I look forward to many years of success there. So that's all. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments?
I'd like to echo what Kathy said, thanking the bus drivers and Mr. Anderson for coming and speaking, but I also want to thank Mr. Cahoon, who has left. He contacted me first with this concern, and I encouraged him to come speak to the board. Considering that it is state law that caucuses are held and schools are the only places they can be held, I think we really ought to consider adopting a policy around that.
Any other comments? Okay. Then we'll move on to our next agenda item. We have an information item on the 2018-19 budget development process, timeline and milestones. And I think Mr. Sutter will be joining us.
Good evening. So used to being at the end of the agenda. So we have a brief PowerPoint. Let's see, find the right view option here. Okay. So this is a brief overview of the budget development process for the 2018-19 fiscal year. We implemented this presentation a few years back to help communicate to the public as well as the school board sort of the timeline and the inputs that occur throughout the budget development process. So first off, we have the timeline. It's about 6 months long from when we start talking about it now through the end of June when the budget is required to be adopted by law. This purple timeline represents the stakeholder input opportunities. So this is again spanning about 6 months, and it's not just any single event, meeting or report, but really a fluid timeline of lots of opportunities for that input. This includes parent groups, district accountability committee, district parent council, district staff input, community input, public comments at board meetings, all of that. So a very long timeline for the opportunity to give input on budget development. Next, we layer on the officially scheduled board meetings and board work sessions. Although there are opportunities to add some, these are the regularly scheduled meetings that will occur throughout that timeline. These are opportunities both for public comments as well as the board to provide feedback to staff on the development of the budget. Next, we layer in what we refer to as our data inputs. So these are date certains by which some information becomes available. This could include or does include state revenue forecasts for the current year, which tends to give us an idea how the state is putting together its next year's budget. Enrollment updates, enrollment projections, the consumer price index, which is the number by which inflation plus growth, it's the inflation component. There was a change to that this year. They've sort of renamed the metropolitan area that is referenced to it. It used to be the Denver, Boulder, Greeley. Now it's the Metro Front Range or something like that. So although it's heavily front-loaded as far as these data inputs occur, one of the major ones towards the end is the adjournment of the General Assembly, Colorado General Assembly. So that's usually towards the end of their process is when they finalize the School Finance Act. So we do get lots of information up front, but there's some pretty big inputs that come later on in the process. Next, what we have are our feedback opportunities. So although they can occur at any board meeting or any work session, these are the ones that are scheduled at this point in time. So these are the work session for discussing the preliminary budget or the proposed budget, or even generating budget priorities earlier on in the process. Again, these are just the ones that are regularly scheduled at this point in time. Next, we layer on our action items. So these include the distribution of staffing to schools, the major component of the budget by far, as well as a couple other actions around employee notifications. These are contractual agreements that if there's going to be a reduction in force or anything like that, there's date certains by when that needs to happen. We have a couple of opportunities in here for the board to adopt the budget development priorities and approve the distribution of staffing to schools in late February. That is a new action item proposed for this process to occur. And then, of course, by June 30th, the statutory deadline by which the board must adopt the upcoming year's budget. And then we put them all together and have all the bits and pieces layered on for the public. The end.
Any questions or comments from board members? Some of us met earlier today about the timeline and yeah, Sam.
Just quick, is that renaming of our CPI area just something to be more accurately descriptive, or will it result in any material change in the CPI?
I don't believe it'll be any material change. It's just
descriptor by which they're doing it.
Yeah, thanks.
Donna?
So I forgot to ask earlier today, but on the January 9th, the work session, could we see trending details about the budget, class sizes, staffing ratio, so that we'll have more of a historical perspective on where we've been and where we're going?
So that is planned for the 23rd
Okay.
work session with our strategic financial plan document that we'll have prepared for that meeting to go over.
Okay,
Is that it, Donna?
that's it. Sorry. Whoops.
Anyone else have questions? All right, well, thank you very much. Oh, Kathy.
For the January 9th work session, will we be able to have the budget estimates for cameras in the high schools and on the buses? I think we already have that number, but we could have it be public, that information.
I believe that you will get that tonight.
Okay. It was sent by an email. I just wanted to make sure that we had it
Yeah,
available.
you'll have that tonight.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Is that it? All right, let's move on to our next information item, which is an update from the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
All righty. Good evening, President Marquis, members of the board, and Dr. Stevenson. Typically, our CBOC, or Citizens Bond Oversight Committee chairs provide the quarterly update, but unfortunately, they couldn't attend tonight, so you are stuck with me and Mrs. Zeeb here. Special thanks to everyone that attended the Metal Arc ribbon cutting last night. Very well attended, a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm. As I was walking the building, giving a tour, I had to stop and think. All of the renovations, if you really think about it, really support our mission. Mission of creating challenging, meaningful, engaging learning opportunities. If you look at the floor plans throughout all of the renovated schools, that's completely what we've done. That was reflected with what the students said last night also. I'm also pleased to announce that a number of our schools have received design awards from the Association of Learning Environments. Boulder High School Commons received the Summit Design Award for school renovations. Emerald and Creekside Elementary both received the Peak Design Merit Awards. These awards are given to the projects that excelled in 4 key areas: the planning process, the community input, learning environment, and the physical environment. The A4LE also awarded Metal Arc with the People's Choice Award. So we took home several awards. I want to say 6 of 8 that night, so we did well. Next CBOC meeting will be held December 20th at 5:30. That meeting will be held at Manhattan School of Arts and Academics. Just a financial highlight, at each meeting, the committee reviews financial reports and staff presents a forecast of projected recommendations for bond premium funds. During our last update to you in September, our expenditures were $227 million. As of December 1st, we have expended $281.5 million. So a lot of work has been put in place in the last few months. Contracted commitments right now total $331.7 million. The committee has not taken action to allocate bond premium funds since our last report in September. As previously reported, 29.3 of bond premium funds has been allocated to the projects. 24.4 of bond premium funds have been allocated to inflation for future projects. And again, that's not guaranteed, that's just allocated to address inflation as we move forward throughout the bond process. And then, as noted before, all financial reports are posted on the financial page of the bond program website. At this time, I'll turn it over to the Director of Bond Planning, Kaki Z.
Good evening. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of time so that we can provide this update. I'm really happy to provide the update on the progress of the bond program. At this point in time, as Mr. Price mentioned, we have 20 completed projects. The program has been underway for approximately 2.5 years, and we have made improvements in every community in the district and for students at all grade levels. Construction of Phase 2 of Meadowlark School was completed in November, and last night, as has been mentioned, we celebrated the official grand opening of the school. I'd like to take a moment to recognize the tremendous accomplishment by FCI Construction to construct the school on an extremely tight schedule. We set the bar very high, and the project team rose to meet the challenge. We also need to recognize the Meadowlark principal, Brent Caldwell, and assistant principal, Senan Nauer, and their staff for their Herculean effort to get the school ready for students in August. It was no small task to transition the building from construction zone to learning communities ready for students in August. And they started with an open house August 14th. School staff and parent volunteers worked many, many long hours with moving crews over a week's time to unpack and set up furniture, materials and supplies, and get those learning communities ready for students. Last night's celebration was both a satisfying conclusion to a long journey and a celebration of the beginning of a new educational model in BBSD. The projects in progress include 20 projects that are under construction or in design currently. Looking ahead, next summer we will have 19 projects under construction during 2018. Also on the list for the under design projects should include University Hill. Over the next couple of months, we will receive bids on projects that began design in the spring and this past fall, and we'll start to determine the construction schedules for those specific projects for 2018. You may recall that last spring we postponed the BCSIS High Peaks project to this coming summer because the construction bid we received at the time was significantly over budget, not under budget as the Daily Camera reported today, over budget. In order to have constructed the project this past summer, we would have had to drastically compromise the scope of work. I'm pleased to report that with the rebid of the project in November, we received a much more favorable bid. The winning bid was $1.9 million less than the previous bid, and we will be able to complete the full master plan scope of work and all the alternates. And again, we have 20 projects completed out of 63. We have $281.5 million in expenditures, and we are 43.8% complete as of October. As Rob mentioned, staff develops monthly financial reports, which are provided to CBOC and posted to the Building for Student Success website. You can see it on the screen there. The budget and expenditure summary provides ongoing accounting of adjustments and cumulative expenditures for construction projects. We also provide the monthly income statement, as well as a chart that shows overall expenditures by account code. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Board members, questions? Richard?
Thank you for the report. Appreciate it very much. I didn't see New Vista indicated in there at all whatsoever. Is there a reason why New Vista's not in this report?
We're still doing some analysis on the site. Rob, would you like to address that?
Richard, right now, New Vista is scheduled to start design in the spring of 2018 and be under construction in 2019. So we're still exploring avenues out there on how we can improve that site and that building. But right now, that's what we know, design in 18, construction in 19.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions? Okay.
Thank you.
So next we're going to do our action items, and I'm going to read the list of action items. It's a long list. 7.1 personnel items. 7.2 approval of minutes, November 28, 2017. 7.3 approval of minutes, December 5th, 2017. 7.4, 2017 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. 7.5, Acceptance of Donation, Foothill Elementary. 7.6, Acceptance of Donation, Instructional Services and Equity. 7.7, Acceptance of Donation, Manhattan Middle School. 7.8, Acceptance of Donation, Mesa Elementary. 7.9, Adoption of Privacy and Protection of Confidential Student Information Policy, JRCB. 7.10, Amendment to the Construction Manager General Contractor Contract for Bond-Funded Improvement Work at Nevin Platte Middle School. 7.11, Approval of Payment to Front Range Community College to provide concurrent enrollment classes. 7.12, Approval of Resolution 1731 regarding charter application timeline. 7.13, Award of Contract Treasury Management and Procurement Card Services. 7.14, Certification of Mill Levies. 7.15, Citizens Bond Oversight Committee Membership. 7.16, District Audit Committee Membership Recommendation. Are there any items the board members would like to pull from the consent grouping? Okay, hearing none. Before we begin discussion, we need a, oh, wait, sorry. Okay.
I'd like to pull 7.9. And I have questions about others.
Okay, so first let's pull 7.9. Okay, any other items that board members would like to pull? Okay, hearing none, we need a motion to approve the remaining items. Motion by Kathy, second by Kitty. Laura, will you call the roll? Oh, wait, sorry, discussion first. Okay. And do we talk about 7.9 first or after?
After.
After, okay. Okay, so any questions on the action items? Yeah,
I have a question about 7.6. Acceptance of donation for instructional services and equity. So I see that donation is a $360,000 for instructional materials, I guess, books. And I'm wondering what kind of books those are and who they're going to, and because that's a very significant donation.
It is. So that is a donation from the Boulder bookstore. Right. They do this every year. They donate a lot of books that range from children's picture books to novels to other books that are appropriate for secondary students. And we house those at a school and invite teachers to come and sort through those and take the ones that they want.
So it's just a wide variety of whatever they have.
Wide variety of whatever they have.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
In the section where it says dollar amount, it says $360,000, but in the description and justification, it says $36,000. So which is correct?
Is it the 360,000? I think there's a typo in the second paragraph under the description.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yep. Yeah. 360,000, great, yeah. So it's the top one, and we should probably fix the one there where it says 36,000. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question on the 714, and you might have answered it, Bill, today, but I couldn't remember. Does this represent an increase of the Capital Construction Technology and Maintenance Fund mill levy over last year? Yes. Okay. So then the next question would be, is it appropriate for us as a board to vote on this increase rather than it just voted on as a whole? Do we vote on the increase, or is this just approving the mill levies?
So if I understand the question, the approval, the certification of the mill levies is something that has to happen every year for all the mill levies that are levied. And so this is that process. the question about whether the mill levy needs to increase. The budget was developed with a mill levy increase of 1. There was lots of discussion during the budget development process, and this is that what the budget was developed on and what the decision was at the time to increase it by 1 as authorized in the ballot language.
Okay, so it naturally just gets increased without a separate board vote?
There's board discussion during the budget development process, and then this is the final step saying this is what the number is.
Okay.
So, Bill, you're saying there will be more discussion the next time we
Yes.
want to do this?
Yes.
But this is looking backward at this point?
Correct.
Okay, Sam?
Yeah, just quickly, I see we're going to approve a new member of the Audit Committee, and so public thanks to Jim Topping. He's not here, but I just wanted to thank him because having served on the Audit Committee with him, he was just a great example of someone bringing professional expertise, no agenda other than to help with in his role on the Audit Committee, and really grateful for his service. And we've got a great replacement, Bob Smart, who served for many years on the Superintendent's Budget Advisory Group, and who I've had the pleasure of working with in other civic endeavors. So thanks to Jim, and happy to welcome Bob to the Audit Committee.
Thank you for recognizing Jim, Sam. He was so great to work with. So, any other questions about these items, board members? Okay, hearing none, I think we can call roll on the consent grouping.
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, so item number 7.9, adoption of privacy and protection of confidential student information was pulled. And Shelley, do you want to talk about that?
As most of you know, this is something that I've been thinking about and working on hard for many years. And it's a disappointment to me that this policy is coming in sort of the rote form that is the CASB model policy without consideration for additional protections, which I've been advocating for years for our students. And I'd just like to point out the ways in which I think that this policy is lacking. First of all, it doesn't clarify who owns the student data. So is it BVSD? Is it our contract provider? Is it the party they share, the contract provider shares the information with another party? And should it be any of those parties, or should it be parents and students who own this data? And that's a very important clarification I think needs to exist, and it doesn't exist in this policy. And one of the reasons it's important is because this policy, if you, let's see, I think it's on page 2. There's a provision in here that requires school service contract providers to safeguard the privacy and security of student PII. So what it's not saying who owns it, but it's giving responsibility to safeguard the data to someone else. BVSD is not taking that responsibility with this policy. I think that's not a good idea. I think we should have responsibility for that. We know now that when we contract with some of our contract providers that they share data. That's a very common thing that happens. So, for example, we contract with Naviance, and Naviance contracts with Gallup surveys. They contract with Dell computers. They contract with the College Board, the Common App. So they share a lot of the information that our students have with these other parties. And now we're saying, oh, by the way, Naviance, you have responsibility for making sure these other parties safeguard student data. But we know that Naviance is not doing that, because Naviance actually has a button that you can click if you want to waive your FERPA rights, which are our students' federal privacy rights. And in doing so, then you can do certain things like make sure that you can't see your teacher's recommendation of you, those kinds of things. So Naviance is not in it to protect our students' data privacy rights. In fact, they're asking kids to give those up. And so I have an issue with that, and I'm not sure why our district even uses Naviance. I know that there are other districts that use something like, I forgot what the name of it, something, and I'm sure Andrew would know, something Cruiser. It's 2 words, I can't remember, but they don't request that kids give up their FERPA rights. So there are other options for us out there. And I feel like we as a district aren't working hard enough to find ways to protect student data. The other thing that concerns me about this policy is there's no special provision in here to protect kids' medical, mental health, or any sort of biometric data that might someday be collected, even if we're not now. So that's the kind of data where parents should absolutely have to give consent before that data leaves this district. And that is not a part of this policy. And even when it's in this district, it should be kept in a separate file that's encrypted. There are so many people, so many districts whose data has been breached, and there's no reason to expect that might not happen to us someday. And for us to provide special protections for that really sensitive data, I think is very important, and that's not here. So I believe that if that data was breached, BVSD would be liable for that. And so I think it's really important that we protect it. So I know very well that the state requires us to pass a privacy policy this year. And I feel like we could have done a much better job of this. And there's certainly been not just months, but years of opportunity to do this better. And so I'm going to vote against it tonight, even though I know that we have to pass something, because I feel like it does not offer the protections that our students deserve. And I would request that this board, and I will submit an RFI after the meeting tonight, that requests answers to some of the questions that I have here about how we're going to proceed to protect our kids, because this policy does not do it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comment, Kitty?
Yes, I have a question for Shelley. So you were saying that Naviance shares our kids' data with a number of other organizations. So would this policy making them responsible for keeping it private, would that then require them to do something differently from how they're doing it now?
Well, if you read this, it says that that we're going to, let's see, including provisions that require the school service contract provider, that would be Naviance in this case, to safeguard the privacy and security of student PII, that's personally identifiable information, and impose penalties on the school service contractor for noncompliance with the contract. It doesn't say what those penalties are. It doesn't say who's enforcing them. It doesn't have any sort of consequence associated with it. And neither does our state law, by the way, which is why I am suggesting that we do something that's stronger than our state law. What there did get included in that state law that was really good was a requirement for transparency, but there was no requirement for consequences if service providers are not transparent. So there's no reason anybody would abide by our policy or by the state law, because there are absolutely no consequences.
Thank you, Shelley. I appreciate that, and thank you for putting in an RFI to get some more understanding about some of the issues you brought up. Are there any other questions, or do we want to make a motion? Oh, yeah, go ahead.
So we have to adopt this by state law this year, this calendar year, or this school year? Calendar year. Okay, thank you.
I would just like to know if in the future we can shore this up and make this, I realize we're at the 12th hour and we don't really have much option, so I would tend to vote to let's adopt it, but is it possible to make some amendments to what we're going to adopt?
Andrew, could you join us?
Just while he's coming up here, just to answer your question, Donna, we can amend a policy whenever we want.
So, Andrew, the question has been posed that if the board adopts this policy tonight, can we still do revisions, which we assume we could?
Yes, we can. And President Marquez and board members, I'm happy to answer any of these questions with the assistance of our attorney. Some of them are legal questions. We did have many study sessions along the journey to get to where we are tonight. We had many RFIs that we responded to. I'm not aware of some of the issues that are being brought up tonight. I would encourage you to adopt this tonight. We also have said that we'll come back on 3 specific topics to get you pros and cons on those. One of them was Chrome Sync. Another was a vetting process for our apps. We have that data collected now. We're putting it into a summarized format, and we're ready whenever you are to have a study session to further the conversation. You can update the policy at any time at your discretion.
Another question for you is, have you compared your policies, the policies you've created, with other school districts, and are we comparable?
So the beauty of this policy in front of you, it was developed by the Colorado Association of School Boards, your peers, and most districts have adopted it verbatim. We are asking you to adopt it with a caveat in there, and that caveat are those 3 topics that you asked us to come back with pros and cons. So the answer is yes, and I think we're in alignment with the state and other districts on this particular topic.
Thank you.
So I'd just like to add that I was at the CASB work session where they rolled out this policy, and there was a lot of concern by people in the audience that this was not protective enough, and CASB put it into effect anyway. And of course, districts do not have a lot of expertise in this area, and of course, they're going to adopt the CASB policy. But that doesn't mean that it's protective enough for our students' data, especially the way things are changing now, and with all the breaches that are occurring out there. The CASB policy is already behind the times.
Yeah, and I'm happy to discuss the concerns you just raised further, as well as the 3 that are called out in the policy, right? Chrome Sync, vetting of
the
and,
apps.
Opt-in up versus opt-out.
Opt-out, not for technology, but opt-out for data sharing.
For data sharing, and I think in our last work session or discussion of it, we said we would look at those in February, right? I mean, I'm happy to do that earlier, just as one board member, but February, I think, was called out.
Yes, good memory. We did say February, and that was to give us time to get the information from DTAC, the District Technology Advisory Committee, and from our technology contacts at each school. We have had those meetings now, so we actually have the data, and we can meet as early as the first week of January at your discretion.
Yeah. So, these other concerns are legitimate. I am going to vote yes tonight, but I want to discuss it further.
Thanks. I too would probably vote yes on it tonight, only with the caveat that we would look at it in February and not just look at the 3 elements that you talked about, but also what Shelley raised. And let's look at it very, very closely and see what we can do, because I am also concerned. I did read a little of the stuff that's come out in Education Week, for example. There's a lot of concerns that are being raised in terms of school privacy or student privacy. So I will vote on it yes tonight, but I do want to make sure that we look at it in February and look at all of it.
So Shelley, I want to see if I understand your question. Because health and medical information are listed as a student record, you want them protected separately? And how so? And what kind of health information are you talking about, like vaccination records? I mean, what are you talking about? Because I'm not aware of the school districts having any biometric information on my kids. So I'm just trying to figure out where your concern is and what information you're looking for.
I said medical, mental health, and any biometric data that we might collect at any point in time. I don't think we collect any now, and if there were any, I would want to know about it. And I think there ought to be parental consent to share that outside of the district. And while it's sitting in the district, I think it should be put into a separate encrypted file so that it's less likely to be breached, and to give parents some peace of mind about that.
For example, I guess this isn't student, we're collecting information on respiratory issues, right? When parents call in for absences. But that's not student-specific, so that wouldn't be health information you're talking about. So what kind of health information are you thinking the district would have that they would want to protect. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Well,
because-
every student has medical information on file about them. Anything.
Every student who has a health plan, the district will have access to, whatever is included in that, and that could be diagnoses and also responses, treatments, that sort of thing. So, not for every child, but certainly for the kids with a health plan.
Right, and kids who need to take prescription medicines at school and that kind of thing, that's what you're
Yeah, and
thinking
kids'
about.
physicals that are on file for sports. I mean, there's not probably a kid in this district that doesn't have some medical information that's out there in their file.
It sounds like this might merit further discussion for your RFI, so if we could start with that and then maybe get a better understanding, I think that might be a good next step. If that's so, if there are further questions, that's great. Otherwise, we need a motion to pass this as it is. Okay, Kitty, do I have a second? Sam? Laura, could you please call the vote?
Benford,
No.
Fuqua,
Yes.
Garcia,
I'm going to vote no.
Gebhardt,
Yes.
Marquis,
Yes.
Myers,
No.
Sargent.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, now we're moving on to action items. And our first item is a proposal for new courses, new fees, and changes to existing courses and fees. I think Sam Messier is joining us.
Good evening, President Marquis, members of the board, Dr. Stevenson. It's a pleasure to bring to you the proposal this year for new courses, changes to existing courses, new fees, and changes to existing fees. And I'm joined tonight by Jennifer Garfield, who is our Interim Director of Science and Instructional Systems. Jennifer has been overseeing the shepherding of these proposals this year. They undergo quite a journey before they get to you. They're first vetted at the school level and signed off on by an administrator. Then they are submitted to the district. They're reviewed at the content level. So, for example, a world languages course would be reviewed by the World Language Curriculum Council, composed of those teachers. Then it would go on to our Curriculum Coordinating Council, which has both administrators and teachers on it, and has representatives from all of the geographic areas of the district, representatives from different content areas, and across grade bands. Then new courses also go on public review and are reviewed by the superintendent's instructional leadership team. With course fees, those also go to the Curriculum Coordinating Council and the superintendent's instructional leadership team before coming to you. So if you have any questions about the proposed courses or fees, I would be happy to answer those now.
And did we need to get a motion first on this before we discuss? Laura? Okay, can we get a motion for the proposal for new courses, new fees, and changes? Sam, do I have a second? Kitty? Okay, now if you have questions for Sam. Does anyone have questions? Oh, okay.
I guess I would just observe that it's a hardship for families, all these fees. I understand why we have to charge them, given our overall financial situation and the state's approach to school funding, but we do continue to offer either free or reduced fees to qualifying students who qualify for free or reduced lunch, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just an observation that if there's any way we can cut them, I support that, but we've been seeing this every year. I've been on the board, and it's a really difficult one to get at.
Any other questions or comments for board members? Donna?
I'm really impressed by your thoroughness of your team and reading through this. It's great work.
Thank you so much.
Anything else? Can we call the roll on this?
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes.
Gebhardt.
Yes.
Marquis.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Sergeant.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're going to move on to study items, and our first study item is the interior security cameras and cameras on buses. We heard a little bit of commentary about that today, too. Thanks.
All right. To give you a little bit of background on this, some history on this subject. So 2012, 2013, SIPSE's subcommittee, or Safety and Security Subcommittee, studied or completed a comprehensive assessment to enhance student and staff safety. Just a reminder, SIPSE is Capital Improvement Planning Committee. That was parents, that was staff, students, et cetera. So out of that committee, training was determined to be the district's most critical element to enhance safety and security. Brennan Sullivan, Rick Kellogg, Steve Shelton they made that a priority over the last 2 years, training in our schools, et cetera. Second to training, the committee's highest priority was to secure physical access to schools and provide greater visibility to school campuses. During this bond, the one that was passed in 2014, we are making improvements to control access, that's our secure vestibules, installing devices to monitor exterior doors, and we are also installing exterior cameras. High schools, entire perimeter, middle schools, entire perimeter, elementary schools at the main entrance only, just as a reminder. Undoubtedly, though, interior security cameras are one of our most effective security measures to increase, improve school safety. As long as school security cameras are installed properly, meaning that they don't invade privacy, school security cameras will only enhance the safety and security of our staff and students while maximizing the productivity of our main security office and that of our monitors. So with that said, I would like to introduce Brennan Sullivan. Brennan joined us in August. He served 21 years for the Broomfield Police Department, and also Albert Zamora, who is our Director of Transportation.
Good evening. I'm going to dive right into this presentation and talk about Superintendent Regulation, ECAR. I'm going to briefly discuss some of the highlights. Currently, as it's written, it permits use of exterior security cameras only on our schools. It was written in 2001 and last revised in 2013. In regards to reviewing this video, it's only reviewed when there's a need to do so, either because an incident had occurred or is suspected to have occurred. The district provides safeguards for our systems right now to include password protection, managed firewalls, and controlled physical access to our servers. It prevents unauthorized use and unauthorized users. Our security system, our camera system right now is encrypted. The servers are located in the IDF closets, which are secured in the buildings, and also in IT's office across the street. Our servers are also encrypted so that the video is not accessible. All video monitors are in the principal's or assistant principal office, and they're have a client installed on their computers, and that's how they're able to watch the surveillance video if they need to. All requests for viewing must be submitted in writing. It's limited to parents, guardians, students, district officials, and law enforcement that have a direct interest in the proceedings. And we only release the portion of the video directly related to the incident in question. There's also an acknowledgement of confidentiality and a recipient's obligation when we release video to them, and that's that the content is confidential, proprietary to BVSD, and that the recipient's not going to disclose, publish, share, or otherwise reveal any of the confidential information without the prior written consent of the district. So these statistics here from the school survey on crime and safety that sent out to 3,500 schools in the U.S. regarding camera usage in their district. This is the primary source of school-level data on crime and safety for the U.S. Department of Education, National Center for Education Statistics. This figure provided is a summary of the 2009-2010 school year, which is the most recent year for which this data is available according to the NCES. the Boulder Valley School District, my office also conducted a survey of the 10 largest school districts in the state of Colorado based on student enrollment using data from the U.S. Department of Education. Boulder Valley being one of those. We are the only school district that does not use interior security cameras in our buildings. We asked about any challenges, comments, or concerns from those other districts that they had in implementing security cameras in their districts. And some of the commentary was from Academy District 20 down south was that they were widely accepted by students, staff, and parents. Adams 12 said they've been extremely helpful in resolving criminal matters as well as investigating behavioral concerns. And as funding allows, they will continue to install cameras inside their facilities. Jefferson County School District identified cameras inside their schools as a critical component of a successful school safety program, and that they were invaluable to first responders and school district leadership alike. So the Partner Alliance for Safer Schools has identified an interior security camera system as a key component to a comprehensive school safety plan. The National School Safety Center, Ronald Stevenson, who's their executive director, had also identified that an interior security camera surveillance systems can be an excellent crime deterrent. Solving crimes. Cameras have been instrumental in solving crimes. From my previous experience in law enforcement, I was a sergeant for a police department, and I managed SROs that worked in school districts that did have cameras. If we use those, and they were invaluable to help us solve crimes, and crimes like sex assaults, attempted kidnappings, domestic violence assaults. We had a bomb threat written on a school, in a wall of a school during the day, created some panic, and we were able to, by 10 o'clock that night, identify who wrote it, interview them, and realize that the threat was not credible. Send that message out to the community so that they know this case is solved, your students are safe, this is an incredible threat, and causes little interruption to the school environment as possible. Bullying prevention. When you have cameras in plain sight and people know that they're on camera, they're less likely to act out and they're less likely to have bullying on school grounds. And obviously when that happens, we're able to provide a safer environment for our kids to learn and excel in. In emergency situations, having law enforcement or our first responders have access to our systems during a critical incident is invaluable. Having the ability to identify where they need to deploy their resources, what kind of resources they need, what kind of evacuation routes we're looking at. Just the ability to have that information is going to be crucial in resolving the situations as quickly as possible, saving lives. So security cameras also provide excellent evidence to parents of what actually occurred involving their students in terms of responsible behavior. When we're able to actually show a parent what their student did to violate a rule or law, it's going to provide largely indisputable evidence, save time, resources, and energy as well. The National Center for Education Statistics reported on security measures and trends over time. They looked at 2000 to 2010, and they reported there was a 42% increase. Sorry, I'm not on the right slide. No. Let me go back, hold on. So they reported sorry about that. They reported a 42% increase in the percentage of public schools using security cameras. And they cited personal safety of students, staffs, teachers, and stakeholders, occupational health and safety, monitoring behavior, reducing litigation, and protecting the building infrastructure and learning tools. Purchasing, installing, and maintaining security equipment, security cameras is costly and logistically difficult. There's ongoing maintenance and also operational support that are required to keep the system functioning correctly. If security cameras were installed in our schools, it could send a message that there's a lack of trust or that Big Brother's watching them. However, we don't have the staff or resources to monitor the security cameras, and it's not within our regulation either. It could also create a misconception that we've got these security cameras, we don't need to invest in any more infrastructure, personnel, or policies regarding safety, and that's simply not true. This is just another added layer of security to keep our schools and our students safe. Some have considered the placement of cameras in our schools an invasion of privacy, and although this could be true if they're not installed correctly, the Boulder Valley School District should take a position on installing cameras in places that people do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And this could include common places like corridors, school buses, stairwells, open spaces, cafeterias, and gymnasiums. Anywhere that a student would have a reasonable, student or staff member would have a reasonable expectation of privacy, we would not install security cameras. And those places are bathrooms, locker rooms, classrooms, offices, and conference rooms as well. I am done. I'll let Mr. Zamora talk about security cameras on buses, and then I'll be back for questions.
Good evening. I want to touch base on the intent of what transportation will be using the cameras on buses for. I think that first and foremost, you're looking at training. In an organization that invests heavily in people, you want to be able to go back and look at the footage and review the footage and be able to help the students and the parents with that footage. In other districts, I have 13 years of experience with other districts, and what I have found is that it becomes profoundly important to be able to go back to the video, especially with SPED students, be able to see what triggers, what type of mannerisms, what type of body language really tends to initiate conflict on a bus. In other districts, we have used that review to basically train our SPED, our assistants, our drivers, and staff to better serve our students, our parents, and of course our staff members. Give our staff members tools to be able to deal with some of our more challenging routes for sure. Retrain. So what we do after we get the review is we have a sizable training department here in Boulder Valley, and we would use that review to basically go back and retrain. We're dynamic. We're constantly changing how we handle the student needs. So we would go back and we would actually go back and retrain. Every year we put thousands of hours into training new drivers, new assistants, and we would basically change and dynamically go back to helping our students again. The reward at the end is that you would actually have safer routes. You would have a training team that is more prepared to address, especially some of our more challenging routes, and we would be better suited to basically provide for our public. Bullying prevention, same benefits as in the schools. One of the main things we want to get to is we want to get to the reason, because it's unrealistic to think that you're going to pull students off buses and move them from bus to bus. So we have to find out what the reason is. That way we can address those concerns and we can work with those students. Basically, have a plan, put something in place so that we can deal with the reason for the bullying. Review. The review allows us to go back and at least somewhat see if we can determine what happened. It leads us back to that reason in a lot of cases. It also tells us who's involved, lets us know what students are involved and where we should be looking. Resolve. At the end of the day, it's to keep the students safe and happy on the bus. Give our drivers tools to make that drive back and forth more manageable. So we get to a resolve. We try to settle what the plan is to help that bullying prevention. Student management. I think we had a driver up earlier that was specifically came up and talked about student management, the challenges of driving a 17,000-pound bus and then also dealing with maybe up to 35 students can be challenging. So being able to go back and investigate incidences. When we have an incident that's turned in either by a student, a parent, even a teacher, and go back and actually see a video footage of what actually happened, and then be able to go back, review, and see if we can get to the bottom of how we can get a plan together to help with the student management. At the end of the day, of course, the intent is to make the ride to school safe, save man hours, keep people happy, help our drivers, give our drivers tools, and of course help our students. Drawbacks. Cost, and I know you're going to ask me about cost. I've got plenty of information on cost. I'll answer it as you ask. I don't know. I have a. Well, actually, I'll just deal with it. We have what we're looking at is about $1,000 a bus for the hardware. That's 2 cameras. It's a hard drive, And you're looking, you would be looking, if we went with sped only, so we have 115 sped buses, we'd be looking at about $130,000 to $140,000 to outfit these buses. If we decided to do the whole fleet, we have about 161 buses in the whole fleet. We'd be looking at about 261 and some change to outfit those buses. There's some install involved. You'd be at $300,000 to do the whole fleet with install. That's of course before RFP. I would assume we'd go out to RFP. There's some opportunities for savings and options there. We would have to look at that. Cost is always a drawback, but I think that it's an important tool, especially on a school bus. We tend to be the exception when it comes to having cameras on buses. When you look at the metro area, we are one of the only districts that doesn't have cameras on our buses. The exception being the rural areas, and usually that's the cost prohibitive part. Privacy. When we look at privacy, we have what I would be looking at on these systems is we would be looking for hard drive only systems. We wouldn't be looking for wireless systems. There would be no cloud. They would basically be walking out to a bus and pulling a locked media device out. It would be a hard drive. It would be an SD card. It would be a person who's authorized to walk from that bus back to the computer. The files are encrypted. The files are also not of a common format. So not anybody could even get that file and even play it because it's not a common format. The file itself is encrypted, of course, on both ends. And it would be protected by the people who are supposed to have permission to see that. Other considerations? I would highly recommend that we do the whole fleet, only because of equity, also because there's a benefit to providing safer routes for all the fleets. Our sped population can absolutely benefit, but we would also be looking at some of our routes that tend to be high on the student management side too. It would just all the way around create a safer environment. Some other things that are coming up, stop sign violations have become a hot spot, of course, nationwide. We're currently taking statistics through all of the educational systems in all states to see how many people actually pass our buses when the stop signs are out, and they're working on cameras for that. So that's just another consideration. The identity protection, I think we covered it in the slide above, and the policy and regulation. There's a high recommendation, of course, that we have good, solid policy written around whatever we're going to do with these devices in our buses. So my recommendation, of course, would be to have a good, solid policy before we decide to go forward, and we know exactly how we're handling the files, handling the hard drives, and the storage. So with that, I'll conclude, and if you have questions.
Okay, board members, do you want to start with questions? This is a study item, so we won't be taking any action on this. Kitty?
I have two questions. The first one is, how long would the video or digital file be kept?
So we can, we're averaging right now on our exterior cameras about 50 days. Our policy says we'll retain it for 10 school days. We can manipulate the system to retain it for 30 days, 20 days. We can set the guidelines on how long we want to do that.
So my follow-up question to that is that frequently if there's a sexual assault, it may not be reported in a timely manner.
Correct.
And if the file was discarded even after 50 days, it's still,
it's gone.
It wouldn't be helpful. And then my second question is you were talking about how it's confidential and nobody can share it. So can this be used in prosecution if it comes to that?
Yes. Yes, if we have to release the video for a criminal case, then it could be used as evidence in a case, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Can I just add one thing to that? So we have some of our schools, I pulled data recently, and we have some schools that are in the 70-day range that they're maintaining footage, and just because it picks up motion and it'll store that footage, and then if there's no motion, we're going to save space on our servers.
Thank you.
Yep.
Richard?
I have a couple of comments. The buses in the interior of the schools. I've done my own little research on this, and also some very unscientific research with community members, students, and all of that. And I don't have any problem at all with cameras in the interior of the schools, because I think you don't have, they're there and then you have somebody watching them, you know, someone else. But so the cost, I think, is going to be an issue. But I would certainly support cameras in the schools. The buses, however, I have a question, basically, and the bus driver's still here, so maybe you can help me understand how this would be used, because some of the email interactions that I've had with parents that have issues on school buses, it's pretty much on-time issues where somebody's hitting someone or being bullied or whatever. And my question to the school bus driver is, if you have a camera on your bus and you're driving your bus, would you have a monitor? Is it something that you would be watching so that you would be able to watch the kids also? How would that work?
So to answer your question, I mean, obviously, the drivers are trained to monitor their mirrors constantly. These systems come with a button that sits right on the control panel. It lets them know whether or not the system is recording, functioning properly, and it's also got a button that it would go through the GPS for a geo-tracking. When they see something in the mirror, they would actually push that button, and it would mark it on the video, which then would allow, then they could let us know that an incident occurred. We could pull the video. We could go right to the incident.
Okay, so that answered my question, because I was thinking that maybe you were driving the bus and and I was thinking safety. Wow, and so that answered my question. Thank you very much. So I think it would also provide pretty timely information when we do get complaints from parents that their kids are being harassed or bullied or whatever in the school bus. Then they could, how would that work in terms of registering a complaint like that? Would it be to you or to the bus driver? And how quickly could that parent maybe get an answer to whatever the issue may be?
I'm sorry, repeat? I apologize.
Some of the issues that parents are bringing up are bullying on the bus, and they want some answers to what's going on, or at least they're complaining because their kids are complaining to them. So how quickly could the parent then get an answer to whatever the issue would be on that particular bus ride, and how quickly could that be resolved using the cameras?
So if a parent called in to complain, it would come in either through the school or through transportation or through the security office. We would be able to, as soon as the bus got back to the transportation headquarters, we would be able to pull the data, look at the video, download it, call back the parent. However the complaint comes in, it will be routed through Mr. Zamora if there's a behavior of concern on the school bus and a complaint that we need to look at. So that's how that would be addressed. And it could be pretty timely within the school day.
Then the issue of confidentiality, because there's usually two parties involved in that, you know, when there's those things happening.
So, Ms. Barber, if you could.
I mean, generally, the FERPA protections, the guidance from the Federal Family Privacy Compliance Office is that, yes, it could be an educational record of like 2 students if there was an altercation. And so each of those families could have access to view that video. And it would be maintained like that as an educational record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just also for clarification, the software on the buses have the ability to blur everybody out of the frame except who you want to show on the video.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, other questions or comments? Donna? Okay.
I am a proponent of the cameras. I'm wondering historically why Boulder Valley did not include them in interiors of schools and buses. Does anybody know?
as I mentioned earlier, Capital Improvement Planning Committee made a suggestion. I don't know where it was cut from the scope. Somehow from that committee's recommendations to what was in the bond, interior cameras were taken out. And I don't have a record of that.
Okay, as an anecdotal, from my own standpoint, when I was director of special ed at Dakota Ridge, run by Boulder Community Hospital, we had so many incidents of not only theft, but bullying. And so we did have data on before the cameras were installed and after, and they did go down tremendously. One evidence of a guy going down the hall with an empty backpack and then coming out of the room stuffed with Xbox. and so I can see that the help and the benefit, but I also hear from the students that you don't trust us. So, but I am a proponent.
Kathy?
I just had another quick question is, would these digital files have audio as well as video?
They would not in the schools.
So if there were any threatening words, that wouldn't be caught?
It would not be caught.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Shelley?
So we just established that this would be a part of the student's educational record if they were captured on video doing something. But you have it on a hard drive, and it's stored safely, it's encrypted. So one of you mentioned, I think it was you, about potentially sharing it with law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone else you could anticipate sharing this kind of information with, or would it be only law enforcement?
You know, I would have to consult with Ms. Barber if, on a case-by-case basis, if we were to get a subpoena from a judge saying you have to provide this, then yes, we would have to comply with it, but it would obviously go through her office.
Okay. So we did have a student here from the Student Accountability Committee who brought this up, sort of without asking him. And students have had discussions about this, and his feeling was that they don't want it. And it's not necessarily that they don't want to be caught doing something wrong. It's that they feel like as soon as a kid knows there's a camera in the hallway, they're going to do it somewhere else. They're going to bully somewhere else. They're not going to steal anything in front of a camera. They're going to be pretty wise to this situation pretty soon. So when we're talking about a significant expense, and I know the main reason for doing it is deterring, right? Deterring bad behavior. But how do you justify that when most kids are not going to do it in front of a camera?
I think there's also a fair share that would be caught in front of camera, and I can speak professionally from that position where we have seen, I have seen, and I have used interior cameras inside schools to solve pretty significant crimes, boyfriend-girlfriend assaults, sexual assaults, attempted kidnappings, very serious crimes that have occurred in not necessarily Boulder Valley schools, but other schools in general.
In hallways where there are cameras.
Yes, yes, or in cafeterias, absolutely.
Because I think in the 6 years I've been on the school board, I don't think there's been a bomb threat that wasn't written in a bathroom. You know, they're essentially all written there.
Well, I will tell you, I was speaking of the bomb threat at another high school, and that was written in a bathroom. But there's corridor hallways, and you can see who goes in and out. And without getting into too many specifics, it was identifying who was going in and out of the restrooms. And without it, looking down the hallway and interviewing the people that were in that area, and that's how we were able to solve that crime.
Mm-hmm.
How does that process work? And generally, we don't do that.
I have just a couple more questions.
Well, let's let Shelley.
Okay. So with respect to buses, we have just recently had a complaint from a mom whose multiple children have been bullied on the bus. So I'm assuming from her email that this was kind of like not hit kids that you would see on a camera. This is like saying things to them that were very hurtful and intimidating and scary. So how does a camera help with that situation?
It actually lets us know the seating, so we don't assign seating. It lets us know where the students are in proximity to each other. So if we have a student who turns in a bullying report and we have a date, we can go back to that footage and we can see who's around the child, and then we can proceed.
Okay. So you wouldn't be looking at it until like a parent parent lodged a complaint, then you'd go back and look at those rides and those, where
Right.
those kids were and,
Or a driver or another student.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Marquez, I just want to insert so you all have this information. Went to the middle school and senior high principal meeting this morning. They did a unanimous vote, and these people never vote unanimously on anything. They did a unanimous vote. They wanted you to know that every one of them supported cameras in the buildings. So I just wanted to share that information with you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I haven't heard from Sam, Kathy.
Are there other policies we'd need to update if we were to go forward with this, that we could bring forward to the board? I don't think from my understanding was we don't need to change the student records policy, but are there any other policies you think of that we would need to change?
Well, I think the intent would be to update. It's a regulation right now, so it certainly would need to be updated. Looking back at that, it refers to FERPA in that policy or the regulation as it stands right now. The student record policy also refers to compliance with FERPA generally, so, and that's also slated for review and update now that we've got the student data privacy policy on the books. That was kind of our next step 2 in that process.
Sam?
Clarification, so 300 grand to do the buses, to do all the buses?
Yes.
And then what was it, did we get a figure for the high school and middle schools? I forgot if we did.
Just real quick, overall, we gave you a range.
Okay.
Low end to do elementary, middle Ks and high schools is 3.5, the high range was 4.2.
Okay.
So we would have to determine when we talk, I know there's been some interest as to high schools and middle schools, then what do we do with Ks? So we're making a recommendation for interior cameras at all our buildings, so that's that range of 3.5
Okay.
or 3.5 to 4.2.
Thanks. And a clarifying question about the survey slide. 61% of 3,500 schools surveyed use security cameras. Is that just any kind of camera, including one in the parking lot?
Right.
Or is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Any cameras.
So that's a little bit different information than the interior use.
Right. Yep.
I mean, in general, I think in the public spaces within the schools, putting cameras in those spaces only seems to be an okay balance for me between privacy and safety. Going into classrooms or further, I would have to have a lot more conversation about that. But
Shelley, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I actually wanted to just mention the same statistic that Sam is just bringing up. So we don't know how many what percent use interior cameras, or if we.
That's correct.
So, okay. So it could be anywhere from 10 to
Could be.
100 or to 50.
Yeah, however, the survey that we did of the 10 largest school districts in Colorado based on student population and the student enrollment we're the only ones that don't have it.
Yeah, and then one other question, I think this is for you, Melissa. If law enforcement were to get involved and a judge was to subpoena this information, I mean, that is one of the provisions where we have to give up information. But where would the school district draw the line on this? Because we do have some say in who we give this to.
Well, to the extent it would be considered a FERPA record, then we would be following FERPA and the exceptions that are allowable under FERPA.
Right, but the FERPA allows us to give it to school officials, right?
Right. So in a disciplinary context, we would have, presumably the school administrator would look at that. Would there be maybe a threat assessment team, that could come up?
A district threat assessment team, you mean?
Right. So in terms of need to know, it would depend on, for what purpose it was being pulled. Just to provide to a parent or for some action that's proposed by the school.
But when I'm talking about school officials, I'm not talking about school officials. I'm talking about the FERPA definition of school officials, which means we designate somebody.
Are you talking contractors or vendors?
Yes, like third parties.
Well,
other than the police.
I don't know anything about how the system itself works and whether the video is maintained on a private server. I think you said that in-house server.
Our
so
servers are
we're not
located on
proposing, we don't have the staff, I think you said, to actually monitor it. So we wouldn't be considering anything a student record unless it happened to come up as
Right,
to
I
go back and
understand
look at it and pull it, and then if it is a student record, we would deal with it that way going forward.
Well, I'm assuming that, yeah, it would already be pulled up, right? Because we're not monitoring live, right? It would have to be an incident that got pulled up. But my question is that we release information right now to contractors, third-party contractors, who then release it to other people.
But we release it to contractors that are doing something for us, that we have a contract to do something.
And that's what I'm asking. Can you envision any situation where we would release this to anybody besides a judge or a police, law enforcement? Because I can't.
Unless
And
it's
so-
the vendor that's providing the video service, which again, I don't know technically how that works. If it's just hardware that we have on in-house, but so many things are stored in the cloud. I don't know that part.
We're not
But I
all
can't
over
think
the
of any
cloud.
other situation where we'd be releasing those kind of videos
We're not storing this in the cloud.
as some systematic way to a vendor.
It's on a server.
And there's no reason the vendor who gave us the hardware would want this information.
No, there's not.
So we would never be in a position of releasing it to anyone other than the police or a judge, most likely.
I would say most likely.
The reason I get concerned is this gets out into the, into the world, and all of a sudden a college admission officer has access to some kid bullying another kid on the bus when they were 10, and now they're 18. And, that's something they're sorry about, something they were disciplined about, something they never did again, and yet this information is in the hands of somebody who can make decisions about their future. And I just want to make sure that's not going to be the case with this, because it's already the case with so many other pieces of data, and I don't want to add this to another risk to a kid's future here.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure that information would be retained either unless it becomes part of their educational record.
That's my
discipline,
fear,
things like that.
right, that it will, and then it will get shared, so.
And of course, bus data would never end up on a server, so it's only on the hard drives on the individual buses, so.
That's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Sam had another comment.
The stop sign thing, so is that installing an additional exterior camera to bust people for not, for ignoring that, or?
Yeah, what they're doing now is they have a camera of both forward-facing and rear-facing, and
Okay.
it's got motion sensors, and it knows when the stop sign comes out.
Okay.
It sees the motion of the vehicle go by, and it gets a front picture and a back picture so that license plates can be turned into law enforcement.
Okay.
Any,
And then the school district gets a share of the fine, right?
Any other questions? And just, it's a study item, so we can also submit RFIs if other questions come up. Yeah, Richard.
Tina, no, just because I asked the question to the bus driver a while ago, and I don't know if he was going to answer my question or not, because he requested to see if he would come up to the podium.
Well,
But
so
I
in
don't-
general, we don't have the public comments come up and speak at the podium. So that's just a norm, but we'd love to hear from you via email. So if you want to share your comments to the board email.
You can talk to me after.
Perfect, thank you. So one thing I'm wondering if we want to look at this again in terms of, as we go through the budget deliberation, if this is something, that I feel that there's interest in this board in pursuing this. So is that, it's kind of our next step.
Yeah, would the schools and the cameras come out of bond money, though? Or would that be, do we have the bond money to do that?
Right now, no, we do not.
Okay.
We can make a request to our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to use some of bond premium.
Right.
But right now, I wouldn't be able to say that all
It's-
of
it's
the
allocated or
4.5 or 4.2 could be allocated from bond premium. There'd have to be other resources.
Rob, aren't the outside cameras part of bond money?
They are. Yep.
So some of the outside cameras that we need to upgrade, like at Fairview, are part of the bond money. But I think we have enough money in our carryover that we're going to be talking about in January that could cover some of this. So the question then is what the ongoing expense is, because the upfront expense and then the maintenance expense.
There are two questions in Kathy's comment. One is, yes, we have carry forward. The other is a long-term budget commitment. What I might suggest, Cabinet is currently working on budget, and I think this is an issue that should come to Cabinet so you get more details. And we already have some of the numbers that came to us today, But let us work through what the one-time, if we use one-time dollars, or if we do an investment and long-term, what is it we have to do? But we need to do that as cabinet.
Yeah, thank you. And just as any other budget decision, I know there are other needs. So I'd like
Of
to
course.
know, we're
Yeah.
only talking about cameras
Yes.
tonight.
Yes.
But there could have been other ways that we can spend.
Yes, and we're not doing budget process tonight, but we do have a set of requests from cabinet members.
Shelley?
Yeah, I'd just like to second that comment, Tina. There's a long list of priorities that came before this was ever mentioned that will need to go into the hopper when we decide this.
Okay. Donna, did you have something? Okay, you're good? Kathy?
If it was decided to go forward, could you give us a timeline for how long it would take to implement it, please?
I'll look to Rob and say, could we do a timeline?
I'll work on it.
We can do a timeline.
And maybe a phase-in timeline, starting with the high schools and the buses and maybe
Yeah.
phasing in.
I think so.
Richard, she got it? Okay. All right, any other questions, or should we move on to our next study item? Oh, Donna.
It might be interesting, too, to just have some data reports on problems that were found in the school, how many office referrals, how many bus incidents, and then after camera, what happens, just so the community knows.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, our next item is study of board policy IHBB on gifted education. So Melissa or Sam?
So, good evening. I'm joined tonight by Maya Jorgensen, who is the Interim Director of Student Success. We are bringing tonight to you a policy on gifted education. As we were updating our regulation on gifted education, we realized that we did not have a policy to accompany it. And so we're bringing forward to you tonight this draft policy, which is the CASB model policy.
Okay, so we can open up to questions? Okay, and great. Does anyone want to start? Kathy?
I have heard that there was one, if not two, CDE audits of our gifted and talented program. I was wondering if that's true, and if so, if we could find out what that audit said.
Yes, absolutely. Maya, would you like to come up and share with us?
We have tag programming every 4 years, has a review by CDE, and so it's not unique to our school district, but is a process that every school district goes through. So our interim director last year, Senan Nauer, led our work. It's called the Seeger Review, and then there's recommendations that CDE makes after the review is complete.
Other questions?
Clarification. So we have the proposed policy and the red line. So are we considering each of these or just one of them?
We're considering both the not, oh, well, actually, no, we're not looking at the regulation. We're just looking at the policy, but the regulation is below them, right?
Okay.
Yeah, the red line just shows the regulation that was approved by Cabinet with the changes that were approved to the regulation.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question. I notice it references students aged 4 to 21, which isn't something I commonly see in our policies. Is that's just a CASB norm that they're using?
The language 4 to 21 comes directly from CDE, and that's part of their definition of gifted and talented children for the state of Colorado.
Okay. And then my other question that I had is, it speaks about how the programs are regularly evaluated. Who performs that evaluation in the context of this policy, and is there a schedule for that?
So that would be the Seeger review that takes place every 4 years, and they're representatives from CDE that conduct that review.
Okay, so that's not by our staff. Okay, thanks. What other questions?
The question. In the policy, it says to the extent resources are available for this purpose, the superintendent or designee shall develop or implement programming designed to meet the particular educational needs of gifted students, and it goes on. So is this saying that if there's no money, we just don't do it?
I would hope that that would never be the case, that we would forego programming for our gifted students. I think it's an expectation of our community that we would absolutely invest in appropriate programming for our talented and gifted students. I think we see that as a core part of the services that we provide.
So are there legal requirements that we provide programming for talented and gifted?
There are. Maya, do you have more information on that?
Yeah, some of the, it's part of the same legislation that special education is part of, obviously. And so one of the legal requirements we have is to provide the Advanced Learning Plan, or the ALP. And there's also the identification process, so the testing process is part of that legislation, the identification process, and then the support through the Advanced Learning Plan. So one thing we're doing this year is we have our universal screening for our second graders, and so that sort of fits into our, that one component of that for testing.
So do the policies on special education also use the language to the extent resources are available?
You know, I'm not familiar with that, so we can look into that for you.
It just seems inequitable to me that if this is something we're required by law to do, that we don't start out our policy with the caveat of, oh, well, if we don't have money, I guess we won't do it. I mean, I know that's not our intent.
And I can add, I mean, in this area, it is quite different in terms of how this has been legislated. The special education laws are federal laws, and there are expectations that are set out on from beginning to end in that process, and the level of services that have to be provided. And with the talented and gifted area, there's not that same level of service that's expected, and there's no funding associated with it either. So that is kind of
no federal
traditionally the
funding
language.
is no federal funding?
Right, as far
That's
as I
what
know,
you okay.
There's no state or federal funding that comes out of the
I
state
think a little bit of
legislation,
state.
and there's no federal legislation.
We have some state funding,
Okay.
yeah, but not federal funding.
All right.
Donna.
So I'm sure this encompasses the 2E kids as well?
Yes, and there is language in the regulation that addresses 2E kids, yes. 2E students, yes.
Any other questions, board members? Shelley?
Can you say more about the universal screening that you do?
So this year, we started it last year, actually as a pilot in 10 schools, and we provide a screening mechanism that is based on visuals, so it's not impeding children who are emerging bilingual students or even special ed twice exceptional students. And so this year, through a grant through CDE and some expectations from CDE, we provide a universal screening at second grade. And this year, all of our second grade students are participating in that. And the idea behind it is that it's a way for us to really focus in on students who are historically underrepresented in our TAG population, including 2E students and second language learners.
And you just started it last year?
Last year was our pilot with 10 schools, yes.
And did you identify more 2E and disadvantaged children through that process?
Yes, yes, we have, yes.
And what happens to the data?
That particular assessment is done paper and pencil, and so I'd have to look into further exactly how long that information is kept, and but it's done by the student with a paper, paper and pencil, not electronically.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, so I think that's, we can move on to agenda setting. So any items you'd like to see on a future agenda. The process would be then to most likely do planning as a group, do a quarterly planning and prioritize. For smaller items, we might be able to just put it on. So any ideas, Sam?
We're going to talk about our CASB experience later, but I attended a great session put on by the Cherry Creek School District about how they went through the thorough process of pushing back the start times of their schools, and I may start with an RFI on where we are on that, but that's a topic I'd like to have more discussion of.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Kathy?
I just would like to see the issue of cameras brought back soon. I think the fact that every middle school and high school principal supported this adds to the urgency of it. So I'd just like to see that circle back soon.
Okay. Anyone else? And I just jotted down some of the tech update issues that Shelley brought up. I think you're going to put it in RFI, but we probably need to put it on an agenda. And also just the issue of the caucuses. We might start with an RFI on that and then see what happens. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting.